Most people think smoking began with cigarettes. A stressed out worker steps outside an office, flicks a lighter, takes one drag, and suddenly the modern world makes sense again for about 12 seconds. Traffic, deadlines, bills, tiny paper tube, bad life choices in slow motion. But now strip all of that away. No city, no office, no cigarette pack, no lighter, no warning label, no convenience store at the corner. Go back thousands of years. A small group sits beside a fire in the dark. The air is cold. Their clothes are animal skins. Somewhere beyond the light, something is moving in the brush. The fire is not decoration. It is heat, protection, cooking, light, and probably the only reason everyone is still alive by morning. And then someone throws a plant onto the embers. The smoke changes. It smells sharper, sweeter, stranger. Someone coughs. Someone laughs. Someone feels calmer, or more alert, or dizzy, or afraid. And in a world like that, one small change in feeling could become dangerous knowledge. Because ancient life did not give people many safe experiments. A wrong berry could swell your throat. A wrong mushroom could make the whole camp sick. A wrong plant in the fire could make the air unbearable. But a useful plant? A useful plant could be remembered for generations. So imagine the first time this happened. Nobody had a name for nicotine. Nobody had a word for cannabinoids. Nobody knew what receptors were. Nobody understood chemistry. They only knew the body. The chest tightens. The head lightens. The insects move back. The old pain feels slightly farther away. The grieving mother stops shaking for a moment. The hunter who has not eaten in 2 days feels his hunger dull. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was the plant. But ancient humans survived by noticing coincidence before it became knowledge. And that leads to one surprisingly difficult question. When did ancient humans start smoking? The common belief is simple. Smoking is a modern habit created by tobacco, cigarettes, stress, and addiction. But the twist is older and stranger. Long before cigarettes, humans were already living inside smoke. They slept beside it, cooked with it, used it against insects, preserved food with it, and slowly learned that different plants made different kinds of smoke. So the real story is not just when humans first smoked. The deeper question is why any ancient person would intentionally breathe smoke in a world where survival was already hard enough. To answer that, we have to begin with fire. Humans did not invent smoking before they understood fire. Fire came first, much earlier. Archaeologists still debate exactly when controlled fire became regular and reliable, but the relationship goes back deep into prehistory. Long before farming, long before cities, long before written history, ancient humans were gathering around hearths. And every hearth was more than a campfire. It was a survival machine. Fire cooked tough meat and hard roots. It made food safer. It kept predators away. It gave warmth in cold places. It extended the day after sunset. It turned a group of vulnerable animals into something much harder to attack. But fire also changed the social life of humans. During the day, survival was scattered. Someone searched for plants. Someone watched children. Someone repaired tools. Someone followed tracks. Someone listened for danger. At night, the fire pulled everyone into one circle. That circle mattered. It was where stories could be told. Wounds could be checked. Plans could be made. Arguments could cool down before they became deadly. Children could learn which animals to fear, which stars meant travel, which plants were food, and which plants should never be touched. So if a strange smoke entered that circle, everyone noticed it together. The discovery was not private. It was shared. One person coughed, another laughed, another warned the child to move back, another remembered the smell. That is how a plant stops being random fuel and becomes tradition. But fire also created a new problem. Smoke. Modern people treat smoke like an alarm. Something is burning. Open a window, complain dramatically, maybe wave a towel around like you are fighting a ghost. Ancient people could not do that. There were no sealed houses, no electric fans, no kitchen vents. No, please step outside with that. If you lived with fire, you lived with smoke. It got in your hair, your skin, your clothes, your shelter, your food, your lungs. Children would have known the smell of smoke before they understood the shape of the wider world. At first, That was just exposure. Breathing campfire smoke is not the same thing as smoking. That distinction matters. Accidental smoke is what happens when you sit too close to a fire and the wind decides to personally attack your face. Intentional smoking is different. It means choosing a plant, burning it on purpose, and using the smoke for a reason. That reason could be medicine, ritual, comfort, social bonding, alertness, insect control, or a way to make fear feel manageable. And before we follow the smoke deeper into the archaeological evidence, take 1 second to imagine this. If you had no doctor, no pharmacy, no insect spray, no clean house, and no safe night, would you really ignore a plant that seemed to change how your body felt? That is the kind of survival question this channel is built on. So if you want more stories about how ancient humans solved impossible problems with nothing but fire, stone, plants, and fear, subscribe to Ancient Human Survival. Because the past was not primitive, it was dangerous, clever, and much stranger than we usually imagine. Now, back to the evidence. So the first step towards smoking may not have been a pipe. It may have been observation. Ancient humans were professional observers. Their lives depended on noticing tiny details. One root could feed you, another could poison you. One berry could be safe in one season and dangerous in another. One bark could reduce pain. One mushroom could turn dinner into a funeral. So when different plants burned differently, people noticed. Dry wood burned hot. Damp branches made thick smoke. Resin smelled sharp and clean. Certain leaves made the air bitter. Some smoke drove insects away. Some made people cough. Some may have made the body feel strange. And in a world without hospitals, supermarkets, bug spray, or therapy, this smoke does something. Was not a small discovery. It was information. Imagine a camp at night. Mosquitoes and biting flies are swarming. A child cannot sleep. Someone has an infected wound. The group is tired, cold, and irritated. Then an elder feeds certain leaves into the fire. The smoke thickens. The insects pull back. The shelter becomes uncomfortable, yes, but also safer. That is not recreation. That is survival. Now, make the scene worse. The meat from yesterday's hunt is starting to spoil. The air is damp. Smoke from ordinary wood hangs low and irritates everyone's eyes. A storm is coming, and the group cannot move far because one member is injured. The camp has to choose, stay and suffer, move and risk the dark, or change the fire. So someone reaches for a bundle of dried plants saved from an earlier journey. Maybe they were kept because they smelled strong. Maybe because an elder said they helped with insects. Maybe because nobody fully knew, but nobody wanted to throw them away. The bundle goes into the embers. The smoke thickens. The insects thin out. The smell changes the mood of the whole camp. This is the kind of moment that can become memory. Not because it is magical, because it is useful. Smoke could protect skin. It could preserve meat. It could help dry hides. It could mask strong smells. It could mark the inside of the human world against the dangerous outside. And once humans learned that smoke could change the environment, the next step was obvious. Could smoke also change the body? This is where the evidence becomes tricky. Smoke disappears. Leaves burn to ash. Breath leaves no fossil. A stone tool can survive for 1,000,000 years. A bone can survive. A hearth can survive. But the first person who deliberately leaned into special smoke and thought, okay, that was different, left almost nothing behind. No one carved a little sign saying, "First smoke experiment." Very weird. Would not recommend before hunting. So archaeology has to work with clues. Charred seeds, burned plants, residues inside pipes, chemical traces on artifacts, ancient hearths, later traditions, and careful comparison. The key word is careful, because we cannot simply say, people had fire, therefore they were smoking. That is too easy. We need evidence that specific plants were selected and used. And there is another problem. The earliest smoking may have looked nothing like smoking to us. No rolled leaf, no neat pipe, no person posing dramatically in the sunset like the world's first bad influence. It may have been a smoky shelter, a handful of leaves on hot stones, a bundle of herbs held near the face, a pit fire used to treat a sick person. A ritual where the smoke filled the space, not just the lungs. That means the first real smoking behavior may be archaeologically invisible. The action was breath. The tool was fire. The evidence burned itself. And one of the strongest plants in this story is tobacco. Today, tobacco is almost impossible to hear without thinking of addiction, disease, corporations, and cigarette packs. But tobacco did not begin as a modern product. It began as a wild plant in the Americas. For indigenous peoples, tobacco became far more than something to inhale. It could be part of ceremony, healing, prayer, diplomacy, social bonding, and communication with the unseen world. And the archaeological timeline is older than many people expect. At the Wishbone site in Utah, archaeologists found charred tobacco seeds in an ancient hearth context dating to about 300 years ago. That is near the end of the Ice Age. No farms, no cities, no pottery traditions like we imagine later. Just hunter-gatherers living in a harsh landscape, bringing a powerful plant into the same space as fire, food, and daily survival. That find is huge. But here is the important correction. It does not prove those people were smoking tobacco like a modern person smokes a cigarette. It proves something more careful. Humans were using tobacco around 300 years ago. They may have chewed it. They may have burned it. They may have handled it ritually. They may have used it in ways that left almost no trace. The seeds tell us tobacco was there. They do not give us a video replay. That is the annoying thing about archaeology. It gives you the evidence, then refuses to provide behind-the-scenes footage. Still, think about what that means. At 300 years ago, people were not casually wandering through a gentle world collecting interesting herbs for a weekend hobby. They were living through a changing Ice Age landscape. Animals were shifting, climates were changing, water sources mattered. Every useful plant had value. Every camp location had to be chosen carefully. So the presence of tobacco is not a tiny detail. It means someone knew the plant, someone carried it or gathered it. Someone brought it into a hearth area. And whether it was chewed, burned, handled, or used ceremonially, it was important enough to enter the human pattern of life. That is the part worth holding on to, not they had cigarettes. They had knowledge of a powerful plant at a time when knowledge could keep people alive. For clearer smoking evidence, pipes matter. A pipe changes the argument. If you find nicotine in a smoking tube or pipe, now you are not just saying tobacco was nearby. You are saying people had a tool designed around smoke and breath, and chemical traces show tobacco was involved. One strong example comes from the Flint River site in Alabama, where researchers detected nicotine in a late archaic smoking tube dated around 1685 to 1530 BCE. That is not cigarette smoking. That is not modern tobacco culture. But it is much closer to confirmed intentional smoking. A plant was selected. A device was used. Smoke and breath were part of the behavior. And that tells us something important. Smoking probably did not begin as a casual private habit. It was likely social, medicinal, ceremonial, or all three at once. In many indigenous traditions, smoke was not just smoke. It carried meaning. It rose upward. It marked agreements. It entered the body and left the body. It could connect people to ancestors, spirits, animals, and the land. A modern cigarette is often lonely. Ancient smoke was often communal. That difference is huge. Modern smoking often happens on the edge of a place, outside the office, behind the building, away from the table, separated from everyone else. Ancient smoke may have happened at the center, near the fire, near the elders, near the sick, near the dead, near the moment when the group needed a shared action. That does not make it harmless. It makes it human. And tobacco was powerful. Nicotine can affect attention, appetite, stress, wakefulness, and mood. For ancient people facing hunger, pain, cold, grief, and danger, those effects would have mattered. Not because tobacco was safe, it was powerful precisely because it was not neutral. The same plant that could feel useful could also create dependence. Addiction is not a modern invention. Modern industry made it bigger, faster, cheaper, and more profitable. But the human nervous system was vulnerable long before factories learned how to package that vulnerability. Still, tobacco is only one part of the story, because humans in different parts of the world discovered different kinds of smoke. In Central Asia, archaeologists found one of the clearest early examples of cannabis smoking. At the Jirzankal Cemetery in the Pamir Mountains of western China, researchers found chemical evidence that cannabis was burned in wooden braziers around 500 years ago, likely in a mortuary or ritual setting. Picture that scene, not a modern person relaxing on a couch. A high mountain cemetery. Thin air. The dead nearby. Hot stones. Wooden braziers. A group gathered around a rising cloud that was meant to be breathed, shared, and felt. The drama here is not that people found a way to escape reality. The drama is that reality was already overwhelming. Death was close enough to touch. Grief had no therapist. Fear had no medication. The group had no hospital, no police, no written law, no emergency number. So the smoke became part of the technology of emotion, a way to make the invisible visible. Pain becomes breath. Grief becomes a cloud. The dead are gone, but the smoke rises. That is powerful. Even before we talk about chemistry, that smoke was not just a smell. It was part of a moment between the living and the dead. This is where the modern idea of smoking becomes too small. When we say smoking, most people imagine a person inhaling for pleasure or addiction. But ancient smoking-like practices could include many things: fumigation, incense, medicinal smoke, ritual inhalation, plant vapors, smoke-filled shelters, pipe use, and communal ceremonies. The technology was simple: plant plus fire plus breath. But the meanings were huge. Aromatic resins could make a space feel purified. Certain herbs could calm or stimulate. Cannabis could alter perception. Tobacco could sharpen attention and carry ceremonial power. Smoke could transform a normal place into a sacred one. And this makes sense in survival terms. Ancient humans did not separate body, mind, medicine, and spirit the way modern people often do. A sick child, a failed hunt, a death in the group, a dangerous journey, a storm, a predator attack. These were not just practical problems. They were emotional and spiritual emergencies. Smoke gave people something visible to do with invisible fear. It made the air change. It made the group gather. It made the moment feel controlled. And control, even symbolic control, matters when the world is unpredictable. Think about modern life. When people are stressed, they still reach for rituals. Coffee in the morning, a cigarette break, incense, a candle, deep breathing, a walk outside. Even scrolling a phone is basically a tiny glowing anxiety ritual, just with worse posture. Ancient people had fewer tools, but the need was the same. Calm the body, focus the mind, bring the group together, make danger feel less random. Smoke could do that. This does not mean ancient humans were casually getting high every night around the fire. That would be the lazy version of the story. The better version is more human. Some experiments probably failed. Some plants probably made people vomit. Some smoke probably burned the eyes so badly nobody used that plant again. Some mixtures may have been kept secret by healers or elders. Some may have been reserved for death, sickness, initiation, or dangerous journeys. And some may have become ordinary enough that children grew up knowing the smell before they ever knew the meaning. That is how culture forms. Not from one genius inventor saying, "I have invented smoking." More likely from thousands of small trials, small mistakes, and small memories around fire. They experimented because survival required experimentation. They tested plants because plants were medicine, food, poison, fuel, and mystery. They used smoke because fire was already the center of life. And over many generations, some smoke became special. Some smoke was for insects. Some was for meat. Some was for sickness. Some was for the dead. Some was for prayer. Some was for focus. Some was dangerous. Some was remembered. So, when did ancient humans start smoking? The honest answer has layers. If we mean breathing smoke from fire, then the story begins deep in prehistory. whenever humans began living regularly with controlled fire. If we mean intentionally burning useful plants and breathing their fumes, that may be very old, but the earliest moments are almost impossible to prove. If we mean tobacco use, current evidence points to humans using tobacco in North America around 300 years ago. If we mean clearer pipe-based tobacco smoking, the evidence becomes stronger later, with nicotine residues in ancient smoking tubes and pipes. And if we mean cannabis smoking in a ritual setting, strong chemical evidence appears around 500 years ago in Western China. So the answer is not one date. It is a long transition, from campfire smoke to useful smoke, from useful smoke to medicinal smoke, from medicinal smoke to sacred smoke, from sacred smoke to pipe smoke, and much later, from pipe smoke to the cigarette, the industrial version that turned an ancient human experiment into a global addiction machine. That final step is important. Smoking did not begin in a factory. It began beside fire. It began in a world where a plant was never just a plant. A leaf could feed you, heal you, poison you, calm you, wake you, frighten you, or carry your words into the dark. For ancient humans, smoke was not simply pollution or pleasure. It was a tool for survival, a bridge to the unseen, and a dangerous shortcut into the body. So maybe the first smoker was not trying to look cool. They were not taking a break from emails. They were not standing outside a bar pretending they only smoke socially. They were probably cold, tired, hungry, bitten by insects, grieving someone, healing someone, or trying to understand why one plant made the fire feel different from all the others. And that is the real origin of smoking. Not a cigarette, not a brand, not a habit, but a human being beside a fire, discovering that smoke could change more than the air. It could change the body. It could change the mind. And for better or worse, humans never forgot that.